Why the Memphis Grizzlies have been so successful over the past few seasons. This season, the Grizzlies have a 55-24 record, and they're the second seed in the Western Conference. But of course, this didn't happen in one season for the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies did a phenomenal job at building their young core that they have now over the past few seasons. But quickly before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy Sports. I make opinionative NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. But anyways, let's get into it.
Oh yeah, I work with the medics. I'm about to get you injected. I got a couple connections so I can get you prosthetic.
It's pretty clear that this season, the Memphis Grizzlies are not only one of the best teams in the Western Conference, but the entire NBA, and of course have a decent chance to win an NBA championship this season. But as I mentioned before, the great team that the Grizzlies have now wasn't necessarily something that they did overnight. It took a while to actually form this team. But how did they actually get this great young core that they currently have now? Now, I mentioned this in a lot of my videos, but the most important thing you can do as an organization is draft effectively. When you look at the best teams around the NBA over the years, you talk about the Golden State Warriors, Miami Heat, Milwaukee Bucks even. And what do all these teams have in common? They all have a great ability to draft effectively. When you talk about getting players in free agency, that's kind of luck. But if you're able to draft effectively, you can set up your team for long-term success. That would eventually lead you to be able to sign some great players in free agency as well. But the main part that you have to figure out first is actually drafting effectively. And I think that's really what we started to see with the Memphis Grizzlies over the years. But of course, whenever you're building a team, you have to build around a certain player, and during the 2019 NBA draft, the Grizzlies found their player, which of course turned out to be Ja Morant. Now, of course, at this point, we all know that Ja Morant is one of the best young players in the NBA, and honestly, one of the best players in the NBA in general. He's just that good. The capabilities that Ja has in terms of his individual scoring, especially once driving all the way to the basket, using his crazy athleticism to get some nice posterizing dunks, or finishing around players with crafty layups, his great ability to hit that pull-up mid-range jump shot and a floater as well. From that three-point range, of course, he's not necessarily known for his three-point jump shot, but over the years he certainly has improved upon that ability, and overall his passing and playmaking ability is phenomenal. But even besides the great abilities that Ja has at this point, the great thing about Ja is over the years he's been known to work extremely hard on his game to continuously improve his game season after season, which is exactly what you want to see from your young player that you drafted highly in that year's draft. And overall, building around a player like Ja Morant is exactly who you want to build around. But the next step after finding your franchise guy would be drafting players or bringing in players from free agency that would be nice complementary pieces to put around that main superstar that you have. And for the Memphis Grizzlies, they were able to do a phenomenal job at doing just that. It just so happened that the season before, they were able to draft Jaren Jackson Jr., who perfectly matches Ja Morant's game, as he does a great job at spreading the floor and hitting those catch and shoot three-point jump shots, giving Ja the space and ability to drive all the way to the basket. He also does a phenomenal job at running the pick and roll / pick and pop with Ja, and overall those two guys just match up very well together. But even besides Jaren, they were able to bring in Dillon Brooks, who's a phenomenal shooting guard next to Ja, due to the fact that he is actually a really good defender and Ja isn't necessarily a great defender, so having that mismatch is phenomenal, as well as he does a great job at spreading the floor and hitting those catch and shoot three-point shots. Of course, they also have Desmond Bane, who's a pretty good defender as well and spreads the floor pretty effectively. Brandon Clark's a pretty good player coming off the bench. And after they were able to bring in some of these guys, either in free agency or the NBA draft, in order to build a nice young core, they were able to then continuously get better. And of course, after you build your nice young core, you can then add some supplementary pieces during free agency that the Grizzlies have done a phenomenal job at doing over the years. Just looking at their team this year, they brought in a guy in Steven Adams who does a really nice job at just rebounding and being a nice defensive anchor for the team. And of course, another great thing about building your team through the draft and just having a young team in general is as the seasons progress, you would continuously, or you would expect to continuously get better each and every season due to the fact that the players on your team are getting more experience, of course. And that's basically how the Memphis Grizzlies got to the point that they're at now. Of course, the main thing was drafting and of course getting Ja Morant, but also doing a great job of putting some nice supplementary pieces around that young core that they did build over the years, and eventually it just turns into the great team that they have now. But now, what are my personal expectations for the Grizzlies this season? Do I think the Grizzlies could potentially win an NBA championship this year, or do I think it's too early for the Grizzlies and they need more time? Now, in terms of the actual talent level that the Grizzlies Grizzlies have, I think it's pretty obvious to basically anyone watching this team that they're a very, very talented team, and in my opinion, I think they have the talent level to beat basically any team in the NBA. The real question to me personally would be the experience level. Of course, as I mentioned, this team is relatively young and didn't necessarily have all that much experience in the playoffs, and some players didn't even make it to the playoffs on this roster. So once they get there, the biggest thing to me personally is just going to see how they really react to once they face adversity, because of course when you make it to the playoffs, you are going to face adversity. I think a guy like Moran is probably going to be fine once he makes it to the playoffs. He has played very well in the playoffs in the past, and I think he's just too great of a talent not to play well. But the real question is some of the other supplementary pieces, how will they play? That's the biggest question to me personally. Now, looking at some teams in the Western Conference that I personally think will give the Grizzlies trouble, of course the Phoenix Suns probably would give them a lot of trouble. I think in my opinion the Suns are the favorite to win the championship this season. The way they're playing out there is so amazing, both offensively and defensively. Looking at a team like the Golden State Warriors, although they have been floundering at least as of late, I think they would be a very difficult matchup for the Memphis Grizzlies as well. A team like the Dallas Mavericks, I think they're a very sneaky team and a very talented team ever since making that trade for Spencer Dinwiddie. I think they got better after that deal. And honestly, all the teams below them, I think the Memphis Grizzlies would have a relatively easy shot at beating those teams. Not necessarily saying any of those teams can't beat Memphis, I just think Memphis would have a great chance at beating all those other teams. But when I talk about some of the teams that I think the Grizzlies would have trouble with, I'm not necessarily saying I don't think the Grizzlies would win. I just think they would have a little bit of trouble with those teams just due to the fact that all those teams have a ton of experience under their belt, and of course they also have very, very talented teams as well. So in my opinion, I would fully expect the Grizzlies to of course get past the first round, and depending on who they play in the second round, I would probably expect them to win as well. But if they face one of those teams in the Phoenix Suns, Golden State Warriors, or Dallas Mavericks, I think it would be a difficult matchup for them. But out of those teams, of course the Mavericks would be the easiest to beat, and probably in that matchup I would favor the Grizzlies. But in a matchup against the Golden State Warriors or the Phoenix Suns, I think it'd be very, very close. But the great thing about the Memphis Grizzlies is even if they don't win an NBA championship this season, it's not like their championship window is closing. Of course, all their players are really young, and the more they play together, the better they would get theoretically, and maybe the Grizzlies front office does a great job at bringing in some more rookies this following season, and maybe they bring in some nice players during free agency as well, and just become that much of a better team going forward. But long term, I fully expect this Memphis Grizzlies team to continuously get better season after season, and specifically Morant. I think he's also going to get continuously better and better as the seasons progress, which kind of sounds crazy because Ja at this point is already such a great player, but I honestly think his work ethic would suggest he's only going to get better as time progresses. And in the future, I certainly think the Memphis Grizzlies have a great chance to win an NBA championship, if not this year, who knows. The biggest key for that though is just to continue to do the things that they're doing now in terms of drafting effectively, and of course also continuously getting better and improving the talent that they already have on their roster. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think the Memphis Grizzlies could potentially win an NBA championship this season, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these two videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.
Oh yeah, I work with the medics. I'm about to get you injected. I got a couple connections so I can get you prosthetic. Hope you can't go